Okay, welcome back. We are now going to go to Q&A. If you have additional questions, please place them in the chat. If you're asking a specific speaker, please note that in your question. So we are going to begin with a question for Ms. Stallworth and Dr. Warner. So are there specific fingerprints to sources of dust that point definitively to conventional or possibly residual, unconventional from waste? Or what is this? And maybe to go into the source of the waste being used.
I think Nat probably described it pretty well. I think he might have responded in a later message, so I'll let him add on if I miss anything. But there are specific fingerprints you can use, different isotopic ratios for some of these elements that are in conventional and unconventional wastewaters. So if you are able to get a sample of dust or even road material, you can kind of apply what Nat had been talking about towards the end, and possibly be able to see those ratios. One thing that we ran into was kind of getting a significant volume, kind of that really small fraction that you're looking at. So there might be challenges with like volume issues, but I think it could be possible.
Yeah, if you had a sample of what was spread, for example, I think we'd be able to tell you whether it was conventional or unconventional. If you were looking at the road itself after it was applied, if a long time went by, it might be pretty challenging, but you might be able to see that and make some inference about which type of material was spread using those isotope ratios.
There was a lot of discussion of this in the chat, but could you clarify a bit on what is primarily used or legal to use on the roads?
Oh, what is really allowed to be spread on roads right now?
Well, has been in the past, for example. There's been a lot of conversation within the chat on whether it's unconventional or conventional waste.
I've really only seen conventional. That's where I kind of have to draw it. I would not want to venture a guess. It appears as though people have said there's been unconventional spread, but my understanding right now is that there is a code product designation that an operator or oil and gas operator could call their product similar to a commercial product. And I'll have that right down here. It's Title 25, PA Code 287.1. And if you went through that process as a conventional operator, you could say your product could be used and spread on dirt and gravel roads to suppress dust. And you can still do that today, and that'd be all right. I don't believe that applies to unconventional, but I'm not going to wade into that. We're not.
Okay. For Dr. Katayer, what are the options for remediating forever chemicals from the bedrock and soil? Are there technologically advanced options that could be explored to clean up the pollution?
So, as I mentioned, it's very difficult to clean up a site when it's been contaminated with PFAS. It's expensive, and the technology, I think, is limited. Which is what makes it so dangerous when you consider PFAS contamination of drinking water. It's once it diffuses in the environment, it's very difficult to get it back. But I am not aware, I'm not an engineer, but I'm not aware that there are effective, both technically, but also cost-effective ways to completely clean up a site once it's been contaminated.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Phillips, any comment on the new FERC commissioner who, as DC's Public Service Commission chair, supported a program approved last December to replace the city's aging natural gas pipeline system over the next 34 years?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so that's a really great question. And what I know from Massachusetts and actually also in DC is that the gas companies want to replace all the pipes, all the leaking pipes. And that's a big moneymaker for the gas companies because they get guaranteed like 8 to 10% profits from ratepayers to do that. Instead, we should patch the leaks, repair the pipes, don't replace the pipes where we can do so, and that will save ratepayers a lot of money. In Massachusetts, ratepayers are looking at $20 billion to replace about a third of our pipeline inventory that's leak prone. We could patch every single one of those leaks for under $1 billion instead. And that would afford us the ability to transition to cleaner, safer, healthier ways to heat our homes and businesses.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Shonkoff, what role did Pennsylvania's early efforts to kickstart its fracking industry play in propagating national and global trends towards greater oil and gas pollution in the last 10 years?
So if I understand the question correctly, the question is how much methane has been emitted due to expansions in oil and gas development in the state of Pennsylvania. If that's the question, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, or at the tip of my fingers, rather. But you have to think about that in a couple of different ways. One is, how much methane has been leaked that wouldn't otherwise have been leaked if there wasn't a massive build out and expansion of shale gas development. And the other way to think about that, or the other important pillar in that, in approaching that analysis, would be how much more gas has been combusted due to that type of expansion. Those numbers are knowable. I just don't have them off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry for bouncing around, but another for Stallworth and Dr. Warner. What kind of road maintenance is done with produced water? What about land spreading?
I think mostly in Pennsylvania, it was used for dust suppression or de-icing. I know there were a couple states that use it for land spreading, but we didn't really focus on that as a use. Not to do anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I forget whether it was Kentucky or some other states allowed land spreading. Ohio and Pennsylvania both previously allowed or currently allow spreading on roads for dust suppression and de-icing. Sometimes you can mix it in when you're applying new road aggregate, and that is meant to kind of help bond it initially. And that's kind of best practice, actually, is if you mix it together, then you apply to the road, roll it down, and it's meant to bind those particles together in the road. But that's kind of the maintenance that is allowed.
In Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania.
Dr. Katayer, how prevalent is the use of PFAS in oil and gas in Pennsylvania?
The Philadelphia Inquirer found PFAS in 8 wells. I think it's something that really has not been well studied for a variety of reasons. First of all, the information, as I said, that goes to the EPA to conduct such research is really very, very spotty. The companies that manufacture PFAS, the companies that import PFAS, and the companies that use PFAS do not have to identify specifically the chemicals that they are asking to be approved. So many of the identifying information about these chemicals don't exist in the EPA's database. And then when you look at the frac focus database, again, it can be kind of spotty. States can look to their individual Department of Environmental Protection agencies. But again, your mileage may vary. We all know that you're not likely to get helpful information, say here in Pennsylvania. So it can be difficult to figure it out. I do think it's something that needs to be studied, and that means you need to track. First of all, identify the chemicals. Then you have to track where they were used, and then you have to test for them. You have to do soil samples and water samples and even air samples looking for this. And you need to look also at the waste stream and look at landfills and injection wells and transportation vehicles that carry flowback brine to the injection wells. So there's a lot that can be done. There's a lot that can be studied to determine how much PFAS was used in Pennsylvania wells, for how long, and where. I think these questions have to be answered. And until those questions can be answered, when you see the horrendous health effects that we know happen when people are exposed to PFAS chemicals, until that research is done, I really do believe that you need to pump the brakes on this industry. How can you allow this to happen while we are accumulating all this evidence, whether it's evidence of rare childhood cancers, as I mentioned, whether it's all the radioactivity that we're finding, which really isn't a surprise to anybody who understands the geology of this region. Whether it's the climate effects of fracking and how it's accelerated the climate crisis. This is just another example of, why are we continuing this?
Okay, thank you. Dr. Phillips. So this is a multi-part question. What progress have you seen on the transition away from natural gas heating toward heat pumps or other electrification progress in homes and industry? And you also referenced older gas pipes as leaking. How much less do newer pipes leak?
Yeah, I'll take the questions in reverse order. So new pipes, they don't leak, but they are costly. They're like between $1 million and $2 million a mile, whereas patching a leak is about $5,000. And that doesn't mean that new pipes don't fail. They can fail, but generally, yes, you could, if you wanted to, you could stop the leak problem by replacing this entire infrastructure and locking us in for the next 50 years. But that's not the way to go. We have not made anywhere near the progress that we need to, unfortunately, with transitioning to heat pumps. In Massachusetts, it's just way, way too slow, but the pressure is mounting for the state to actually achieve progress toward our climate mandates by law that we have to meet through electrification of the building sector. So we have a long way to go. And over the last 8 years, the leak rate has not declined from about 2.5% for the last 8 years. So we're not making the progress that we need to be making.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question for Dr. Shonkoff. What do you see as the best solution to handling health-damaging air pollution from tanks? Do you think it will require legislation to get timely movement on this?
So yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in my talk, condensate tanks are seemingly flying pretty far under the radar, both in terms of their contribution of health damaging air pollutants and most importantly in identification of of leaks coming out of them, because a lot of what gets used in our leak detection and repair is focused disproportionately on methane, trying to look for methane in the air. But when a thief hatch or the top of these tanks are open and there's a big emission event, most of what's coming out of that is not methane. So the solution is actually startlingly simple. It's ensuring that you have more monitoring and tighter regulations on the openings at the tops of these tanks. It's that simple. That said, in the more moderate term, we should be moving away from these types of infrastructure. But for the time being, in terms of protecting public health and air quality now, implementing and enforcing regulations on the openings at the top of tanks needs to be rolled out right away.
Okay, thank you.